welcome Azran, welcome to BFM Uncensored. The share swap deal between MAS and AirAsia is currently being reviewed by the Prime Minister. So, Azran, can you just shed some light? Why is the Prime Minister reviewing a private sector commercial decision?
Well, unfortunately, I can't because, I'm not even aware that there's a review. I'm not even aware that,
it's all over the news.
Well, a lot of it is speculation, right? Doesn't just because it appears in the news. This is Malaysia doesn't mean it's real.
Okay.
Right? There's been a lot of speculation. Ultimately, what counts is that submissions have been made to the Competition Commission. They're going through the due process of reviewing this to make sure that the proposed collaboration initiatives are in line with the Competition Act, and that's key. And we've got to respect that due process, right? And I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but they say that it's gone to the Prime Minister because the unions have made some noise. Some wags reckon that MAS is 20,000 unionized workers and their dependents could influence voting in the next general elections. God knows when that will be. But do you think this deal will fall to populists?
Look, I'm not going to speculate on that. I'm not aware that anybody has seen. I can't confirm it myself. But what's clear to me personally is that the rationale for this is overwhelmingly clear. That the alternative, and we forget when we like or don't like something, what is the alternative? The alternative is that, it remains status quo. And status quo is not a viable option. Even as AirAsia, it is not in our interest to see, Malaysia Airlines fail, right? And so they clearly need to transform, right? And that means making tough decisions, because otherwise, do we have to keep carrying on as a country to keep, throwing in money into a business that cannot self-sustain, that jobs cannot self-sustain, that these people's salaries, incomes, and livelihoods cannot be sustained? That's simply not a viable proposition. So the status quo pre-collaboration is not viable, because the reality that we live in today is that the global competitive climate has changed dramatically, right? Okay. We've got a situation just in our backyard, big global giants, and aviation is a ruthless global marketplace. You've got Singapore Airlines, Qantas, Cathay Pacific, Emirates, and you see most of these airlines now recognize that you do need a distinct brand portfolio to cover the different segments. The low-cost segment is very distinct from the full-service segment, and you need both brands. You can't use one brand to capture both segments. Now, you can say, Malaysia Airlines had Firefly, but the problem with that was subscale. Because the other thing is, while you've got the brands that are distinct, you also need operating scale, because otherwise you can't compete. I mean, just look at how, Firefly, significantly subscale, lost a lot of money, right? And it was reported in the media, and I guess I can quote it, flying for 6 months to East Malaysia and losing 50 million ringgit. That's insane. That's an insane amount of money to lose. That means it's not viable. So you need to figure out how can we best position ourselves relative to Singapore Airlines, relative to Qantas, relative to Emirates, relative to Cathay, relative to Japan Airlines, right? We need to recognize this, because we don't live in this world of Malaysia that's isolated from the realities of the global marketplace.
True, but then we're speaking of a unionized culture. Well, would you say that...
Sorry, but how is that relevant?
But it's
because you know what? Because, do we say we have unions and so business is as usual? Look what the UK had to go through, right? Same thing. This is Margaret Thatcher 1980s. No different. But ultimately, you have to go through that transformation process, because the status quo is not sustainable. Okay. Are we expecting, as taxpayers, to continue to prop up these jobs? To 20,000 jobs?
So
what about other people? What about the 9,000 people at AirAsia, right? We don't have any, subsidies, right? We've got jobs as well, right?
So are you talking about job cuts? Do you
Absolutely not. I mean, as far as AirAsia is concerned, we're growing. We're very strong. We're going to continue to grow, right?
Okay.
But
let's go back to the culture. Malaysian Airlines, AirAsia, and by extension AirAsia X, two different cultures. With this share swap, how do you see this culture melding?
Look, this is not a merger, so you're not trying to merge an organization.
But you're working together, collaboration.
There are very specific initiatives. As I said, take, for example, can Malaysia Airlines do this on their own? Yes, but it'll be much more difficult, because you don't have time. You're competing against Singapore Airlines. You need 3-5 years to refleet your program. You don't have time. You're running out of money. You're running out of cash, right? So Yet there's very concrete, tangible synergies that can be easily exploited. As I've said just now, as an example, right? AirAsia X today, we send our planes for servicing to Lufthansa Techniques.
Yep.
Malaysia Airlines has idle maintenance capacity. They've got expensive hangars, expensive engineering capability, but it's underutilized. If we send it to Malaysia Airlines at a lower price, and I don't have to fly the plane to Lufthansa, right? We save money, right? It's good for us. It's good for them because they're making incremental revenue. Now you can do this in training, you can do this in ground handling. So they're very specific initiatives, right? So it's not about merging cultures. That's never been in the equation. But it's just being very focused about capturing what would otherwise be missed opportunities.
But you talk about Malaysian Airlines having to change with the times, right? Transform.
Well, the business model, by that I mean the business model today is not viable. If it were, we wouldn't be here in this first place. It's a simple context of being stuck in the middle. It's the nutcracker effect. You on one hand, you're being squeezed by price competition, frankly, from AirAsia in particular, because you've got a competitor who's got less than half your unit cost. How on earth are you going to sustainably compete on price alone when your cost structure is double? You can't. On the other hand, how do you compete with Singapore Airlines, who's got a price premium that they can command because their product and service quality, latest planes, latest seats, latest in-flight entertainment, they've got a yield advantage, right? So you can't compete with quality and you can't compete with price because you don't have costs. What happens? You get squeezed in the middle.
Okay.
You can't survive. So you need to change. You need to do one of two things. You either go this way or you go that way. You go this way means you got to figure out how you're going to cut 60% of your cost structure. Would you rather do that? Cut 60% of your costs, cut 60% of your workforce, or say, look, you know what? Let's focus on becoming better than Singapore Airlines. It's a tough ask, but you know what? This option is also equally tough. So you got to make a choice.
Okay.
Staying in the middle, not viable. Status quo, not viable.
Okay, just to wrap things up, Azran, if you were the CEO of Malaysian Airlines, what would you do to turn the company
Nothing
around?
different than what's been laid out, right? Because I think they've got a clear plan that they have to make that strategic decision. They have to refleet, all the new planes are coming in, and they have to go against the Singapore Airlines model because frankly, as tough as that is, it is tougher to go down the path of cutting 60% of your costs. No airline has tried to do that and succeed, right? So it's a tough decision, but these are tough times. It requires tough people, and that's what you need. You got to be tough. You can't be weak.
Is he tough enough, you think?
Absolutely, I think so.
Bit soft-spoken, but tough enough.
Yeah, look, Ted Roosevelt, right? Speak softly and carry a big stick.
Okay, I like that. Okay, so just for my own knowledge, there'll be concerns that there'll be price fixing for the tickets.
I disagree.
Why not? This is
It doesn't
against the
happen.
anti-competition.
Absolutely, but there's no price fixing whatsoever.
But okay, for instance, both parties say they have independent decisions, but AirAsia X's exit from Europe, then there's parts of India, then New Zealand. That leaves Malaysian Airlines as the
Okay.
only airlines flying
Hang
out
on a
there.
second. Look at AirAsia X. If that were true, does that mean we now fly to places that Malaysia Airlines doesn't fly? Untrue. We're flying to Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Taipei, Osaka, Tokyo. We're flying on the same routes. So competition
But
is
there's
even more intense.
Yeah, there's overlapping routes.
Correct,
So
exactly.
how do you work together
Take,
without
for example,
price
London.
fixing?
Because the reality today is that London has chronic overcapacity. 25% of people going to and from London, including many Malaysians, don't fly with Malaysia Airlines, don't fly with AirAsia X, right? Because they've got Middle East carriers, they've got other carriers who are today pricing below cost, right? And you can look at their cost structures. Report 9 cents per ASK, multiply that by 10,500 kilometers distance, so that means your cost structure is about 6,000 ringgit. When you've got airlines pricing at below 4,000 ringgit, you know they're pricing below cost. So why should we as an airline continue to operate and deploy our capacity into markets where there's chronic overcapacity and price dumping?
A strategic decision.
It's a strategic decision. It has nothing to do with price fixing. So again, a lot of these allegations, frankly, are baseless, are based on emotion. There's no facts to it.
Why are they based on emotion?
Because it's not based on fact.
I mean, no, but people against the deal.
Look, consumers ultimately, in an ideal world, want the lowest prices, the best quality service, right? But the reality is, it is a balance, right? We're not here to simply provide a utility irrespective of, economic discipline, because otherwise we'd just be a government department. We'd be a cost center. Is that what we want? Because then, our taxpayers means less money going to schools, less money going to highways, less money going to doctors, instead propping up ailing businesses. Is that what we want?
Right, let's end it on that note. Thank you, Azran, for joining us on BFM Uncensored.
Great.